Honey, was that the alarm?
I hit snooze.
Was that the first time it went off?
Oh no!
How many times did you hit that thing?
I dreamt I hit it like 9 times.
That wasn't a dream. We're going to be late for Easter service.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, come on.
Wake up! It's Easter! We're late!
Wake up, wake up, ow, 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 wake up. This is not a drill.
Do we do drills?
You better hurry.
We get breakfast.
Peeps!
You guys help each other. You. The surprise.
How was a surprise?
No, you.
My name is Molly.
Well, let's get moving. Come on, clothes are on the dresser.
What's a surprise?
Did you tell Molly she was a surprise?
I'm so tired that she's lucky that's all I said.
Honey, which tie?
Not that one.
How do you know which?
First choice is always bad. Did the dog eat?
Yep.
You can finish in the car. Go, 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 go.
Move. Is everybody in here?
Noah, Harry, Molly. We're good.
Grandpa's not coming?
Grandpa.
It's a great day for golf here at Augusta National. Today at the Masters, the final round. The field is really wide open.
Come on. You can dress in the car.
He cannot dress in the car. My children are in there.
Can't you just let an old man rest in peace?
Does everybody have shoes?
Oh, it's too late for that now. Don't tell me if you don't.
My socks don't match. My shirt has a stain.
I only have flip-flops.
Just turn around. We look like a circus.
Oh man, I can't believe Easter is just 2 weeks away. It just seems crazy. And like Lyle said, our service times are all screwy coming up in a couple of weeks. And in fact, there's only one service that's a normal one for us, and it's the one you're sitting in right now. So here's the way it's going to work. 2 weeks from now, Saturday, we're going to have this huge, massive egg hunt at 2 p.m. The prizes they have are really killer. That's great. And then that's followed by a 3:30 service right after that. And that might be the perfect service for you to invite a family to or something like that. And that's the thing you're going to do. And then there's going to be a 5 p.m. Saturday service. And so for you who are sitting in here at 5 p.m., like that's perfect. You got that going on. But then it's Sunday morning, everything changes. If you've ever come to our 9:30 service on Sunday morning, that's not going to be there on Easter. It's going to be 9 a.m., which actually might work out better for you or your families, like get a little bit of an earlier start. That might be great. And remember, Jesus was up before dawn on the first Easter. So I think you can make 9 a.m. So he did it. And then if you've ever been to the 11 a.m., we're not going to have that one either. There's going to be a 10:30 a.m., so 9 and 10:30. And then for those of you who would rather sleep in and like chill and have a decent breakfast and maybe have an egg hunt in the backyard with the kids or the grandkids or something, you can do all of that and then take your time, get fully dressed, and you can join us for our noon service. So 5 different services, but here's the best way for you to choose which one that you're gonna come to. The best way to choose which one you're gonna come to is to find out which service the person you're inviting wants to come to, and then you go, hey, that's the one I was going to too. So that's the perfect way to do that. 5 services coming up in a couple weeks. Now, you know what actually never looks good on anyone? What's never a good look for anyone ever, and certainly not for a follower of Jesus? It's this thing right here, self-righteous. Self-righteous. If you've ever seen somebody just kind of wearing that, just kind of vibing the self-righteous look, it's like, hey, that does not look good on you. That's not a good look for you, and really, it's not a good look for anybody. But it turns out that people who are self-righteous are generally not self-aware. Because self-righteous is something that's very easy to see in another person. It's really hard to see in yourself because you're not self-righteous, you're just right. You just happen to be right. You're not self-righteous. You just happen to be right and righter than the other person who is unright. And we usually think about self-righteous in terms of religion or being religious. But self-righteous is not just a religious thing. It is a human thing. And self-righteous happens whenever what we consider to be our rightness on a particular view, on a particular situation, when our rightness gets internalized and personalized. And so it's like, I am right as a person. I am righter when we are actually right. And it's not just our view. It's not just that we're right about something. It's that we as a person, we are right. And we are righter. And we are righteous. Self-righteous. And this is true, by the way, this is true in our social views. This is true in our political views, our cultural views, and of course, our religious views. And this becomes pretty much true often in any argument you happen to be having with someone else when you are convinced of your rightness, that there's something righter about me and something that's unright about you. And as that begins to turn in me, that thing begins to happen in me where I become self-righteous in that conflict, it becomes nearly impossible for me to admit that I might actually be wrong, because that would make me unrighteous, that I might actually even be partly wrong, not as righteous as I thought I would be. And it becomes easier for me to dismiss you, to write you off, to look down on you, to cancel you, to be done with you because you are unrighteous. Now, this is so prevalent in our current cultural moment. I mean, this is just ubiquitous. It's everywhere. But this is really important. This is really important because when a view about anything, even an important view about something important, becomes an excuse for me to look down on or write off or be dismissive or disrespectful or, God help me, even hateful or canceling towards another human being who is opposite of me, when that begins to happen, I may be right, but I am certainly not righteous. At least not according to Jesus. So today we are in part 7 of our series, Investigating Jesus, How We Know and Why We Follow. It's a series about how we know there's anything to the story of Jesus and why his story might not just be true, but why he might actually be worth following, as in like following all in. I will follow you to the cross. If that's where you lead me, I will follow you. And here's why we've gone here during this series, how we started off saying that the credibility, and you may never have considered this or heard this before, the credibility of the Jesus movement, in fact, the foundation of the Jesus movement, the beginnings of the Jesus movement did not rise and fall and does not rise and fall on the Bible, or Bible stories, or believing something that you can't ever know for sure. The Jesus movement did not begin that way. Its credibility did not and does not rest on that. The credibility of the Jesus movement, and really the foundation, the beginnings of the Jesus movement, rises and falls on the historicity and the identity of a specific person, Jesus of Nazareth. And here's what that means. We've been saying this during this series. That means, I think personally, if you're considering faith, or reconsidering faith, or even unconsidering faith, the most important question to wrestle with, and I think the starter question to actually begin wrestling with, is not necessarily, is there a God and can we know there is God? That's a great question. Volumes and volumes of books are written on that question, but I don't think that's the most important question in that situation. Or is the Bible true? Can I trust the whole Bible? Is it 100% true? Also an interesting question. But I think the most important question, if you're considering or reconsidering or even unconsidering faith, is simply this: are any of the historical biographies of Jesus' life reliable accounts of actual events? Are any of the historical biographies of Jesus' life reliable accounts of actual events? And here's what's remarkable. We kicked off the series a few weeks ago saying this. There are actually 4 of these. There are actually 4 historical biographies about Jesus dating back to the very first century, the very first generation of followers of Jesus. And you just got to know, in terms of historical sources for in the ancient world, that alone is truly remarkable. And if even one of those, let alone all 4, but if even one of those is actually a reliable account, if what they say about Jesus is even mostly true, well, then I think it's game on. Like journey on, you should sit up and pay attention. We should all investigate what that's about. So in this series, we're exploring one of those first generation historical biographies or accounts, one that was written by a doctor and a historian that we know of as Luke. In fact, the series that we're in actually takes its name from something he wrote in the introduction to his biography of Jesus that goes like this. He says, I am recording eyewitness testimony that happened within our generation. And as I write this, as I record this, I'm aware that a number of other people have already begun this process. These things are already being written down and pulled together and so forth. Eyewitness accounts, he says, that he has been carefully investigating from the very beginning, which of course we've been saying during the series is exactly the work of a historian in the ancient world, what we would expect someone who is serious about this to do. And retrospectively, looking back through the lens of history, we have good reason to know that he did just that he was a careful historian, that he had investigated everything because his 2-volume work is so incredibly accurate on everything that we can fact check. And as he did his work, ultimately compiling all of his research, decades of research, into a 2-volume history, here's what you kind of need to know this because we think kind of retrospectively about these things. Luke wasn't writing Bible stories. He wasn't writing Bible stories for the Bible. There was no the Bible. He was documenting the accuracy of the historical Jesus movement so that people could know the certainty of the things that were being told. He was documenting Jesus's paradigm shifting, culturally offensive, liberating, right side upsetting, dignifying, hope-giving activities and teachings. And this Jesus, and why he's writing and why he thinks it's so important to document this Jesus claimed to know what God is like and who God likes. Jesus claimed to know what God is like and who God's like, which in and of itself might not seem that unusual. There are probably a lot of people who claim to know that, except that how Jesus came down on both of those issues was pretty much the opposite of what anybody else had ever thought or said, which brings us to the moment in the story that we find ourselves today. Now, last week on Investigating Jesus, Jesus had just had this run-in with some of the most respected, some of the most righteous people of his day, and he decides to poke the bear, to kick the hornet's nest, and to pick a fight because it was a fight that was worth having, because they had a version of religion that was hurting people and was actually keeping people away from God. And some of you have had an experience of religion that felt that way for you as well. And this particular group of men, Pharisees, and they were always men, Pharisees is what they were known as, they left that run-in just furious, and they go on the offensive, looking for ways to bait Jesus into saying something that they can trap him in that would make him culpable in a court of law. All the while, Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, where he's already told his disciples he is going to be killed. And Luke brings this all to this tension to a head in yet another run-in with this group, but in a different city, different people, in a different place while he's on the road. And where Jesus tells 3 now very famous stories, the point of which in the context and even in the setup we see this is really the point that Jesus is trying to make with his life and his death, and it's why Jesus' story was worth telling and why it eventually became known as good news. So one day on the road, Jesus is teaching, because he did that a lot. And the last line of this particular conversation he's having with people that Luke records, and I give you this because it's going to be important in just a second, is he says at the very end of it something he said very often, which was, if you have ears to hear, Like, listen, understand, let that get into you. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. Now, here's how we begin. Now, the tax collectors and the sinners. In other words, these are people who, as we would have talked about last week, were considered contaminated. They were unclean, they were perpetually morally dirty, and they were unclean by choice. Like, they were unclean and meant to be. These are people who've given up on being good. They've given up on trying to impress religious people. Like, hey, you go to church, I'm gonna do my thing. They don't care. And they would have been people who were considered hopelessly separated from God. Here are these tax collectors and there's these sinners. And Luke says, and they were all just gathering around to hear Jesus. Like, these are just the kinds of people that seem to flock to Jesus, and these were the kinds of people that seem to have ears to hear. And I think Luke loved this. I think Luke loved it. I think he was like, isn't this amazing? Isn't this great? In fact, he mentions this kind of thing all the time, that people who were nothing like Jesus actually liked him. People who were nothing like Jesus actually liked him. But maybe the more surprising thing, and actually maybe the more offensive thing in his context, is that Jesus actually liked them. Jesus actually liked them. He was righteous, but he was not self-righteous. And as we said last week, he had a righteousness that actually drew people to God instead of a righteousness that pushed people away from God. And Luke's like, isn't that amazing? Isn't that great? To which many religious people in their day and in ours, if they were being honest, would say, no, that's not amazing at all. That's not great. That's kind of wrong. It's actually kind of offensive. And so this group of very religious, very righteous people, these Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they begin to mutter. They begin to mutter to themselves, this man, he welcomes them. It's not just that he's teaching them and putting up with them. It's like he accepts them. It's like he likes them, like he's glad that he's with them and that they're with him. And that's disruptive because, listen, they're not okay. I mean, they need to change. They need to behave their way into belonging. They need to start behaving before they can belong. And you have felt this, by the way, sometimes. Maybe like you've had this kind of feeling like, if I accept this person who's behaving so badly right now, if I treat them with worth like they're okay, they're going to think I approve of them. And if they think I approve of them, they're not going to change and they're not going to adjust their behavior. My relational coldness, my withdrawal, my rejection and judgment of them is necessary to inspire them to change. And he's removing that impetus by simply treating them like they're okay. Now, here's something that's really strange to me. That though this type of thing is such a prominent feature in the stories of Jesus, it has continued to be something that religion in general and Christianity in particular has gotten wrong again and again and again. And so here we are. Here we are, and you can kind of picture the scene because everybody's there, the self-righteous and the unrighteous. They're all gathered around, which leads to maybe an important question. Which are you? Which way do you kind of trend or lean? No raising of your hands, but I wonder if you might identify, like maybe you tend a little more towards self-righteousness. I sure do sometimes. No, you tend a little more towards self-righteousness. You tend to think, well, I work hard at being good. I'm trying to obey all the rules. I'm trying to do the right thing the right way, and sometimes it costs me a lot. And here are these other people, and they're not trying at all, and they're not doing anything right, and they don't seem to care, and like, what's wrong with them? Or why can't they get their act together? They keep saying they messed up, but they don't seem to do anything right. Like, what's wrong with them? What's wrong with them? And we said last week, if you work hard at being good, it's hard not to feel good about it. If you get good at being good, it's easy to start to feel kind of good about that, and that can be all of us, or at least many of us sometimes. But you might be thinking, you might tend a little more towards the other side of that. You might think, I get that, and I could probably feel that way sometimes, but most of the time, I never feel like I'm good enough. I never feel righteous. I am a perpetual disappointment to God and frankly to myself and to people who know me, I don't feel very righteous pretty much ever. And though I'm sure if there's a God, he might love me, but I don't think he likes me. And here in the story, you've got both groups. You've got both groups, and both groups think they know what God is like and who God likes, and both groups are wrong. Both groups are confused about what God is like and who God's like, and I think we can continue to be as well. I think we continue to be confused about these two things, which is not good, because this really is what Jesus came to completely upset. And so he tells not just one, but three stories to get at this, to flip all of this around. And he begins with a story that's pretty much guaranteed to get everybody's head nodding in the same direction, like the same response coming from both groups. And he tells a story. The story goes like this. Suppose one of you had like 100 sheep, and then you lose one of them. What do you do? What does he do? What does she do? I mean, you still have 99. Like, that's pretty good. That's still pretty good. Are you good with that? Are you good with the 99? Now, I understand that a couple of us have never actually owned sheep. And maybe none of us actually have 100 of them. So let's think of this in terms of like your kids. Like you got 3 kids and then one gets lost. Are you okay with that? Like 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So I got the 3-year-old and the 5-year-old. I think we can call it a day. Are you okay with that? If I lose my phone, am I okay with the fact that I still have my keys in my wallet? Like, no, when you lose something that's valuable to you, you take absolutely no consolation in the unlost things. If it is truly valuable to you, you become obsessed over the thing that you've lost. Isn't that true? And so Jesus' story continued. And they're like, yeah, that's what we would do. He continues. When he goes off and he's obsessed and he looks everywhere. When he finally finds the lost sheep, he's pumped. He throws a party, comes back home, calls all of his friends. He's like, I found it. You wouldn't believe where it was. Oh, I'm okay now. Everything's fine. And here's the point of the story. When something valuable is lost, you look for it. You look for it. You want it back. And the more valuable it is, the longer you look and the more obsessed you are. And when you find it, you rejoice. That's what you do. And then Jesus says, I tell you the truth. Heaven is the exact same way. There is more rejoicing in heaven over one of these sinners that you think are far from God and don't belong to God. There is more rejoicing when even one of them returns, when only one of them reconnects with their heavenly Father, than over the 99 who are already okay. Like, everybody's got to be like, well, wait a minute. Neither group thinks like this about what God is like and who God's like. So you're saying that God views all of those unrighteous people or us unrighteous people like something that's so valuable to him that he's obsessed over finding us. And when he finds us, he's just so pumped that he throws a party. Like, I don't think I look at God that way. And to those who maybe lean a little bit more at times towards that self-righteous, I obey all the rules, what's wrong with the other people? Here's a question. Is that how you view people who are not as right as you, not as together? Do you view them as being so valuable, so incredibly precious, so loved and desired by God when you're feeling kind of self-righteous and better than and superior to and wondering what's wrong with them? Is that how you view people? Then Jesus does something that would have really stood out to them, but we totally miss. He tells a second story that starts out like this. Or suppose a woman. Jesus tells a story that features a woman as the protagonist, as the hero, as the lead character. And in fact, he did this kind of thing rather often. In fact, in this story, the woman is the person who represents the God-type character in the story. God is kind of like a woman. And the women in the audience, and Jesus, by the way, regularly taught women, which, again, just was culturally offensive and completely out of character for a rabbi. And the women in the audience kind of stood up a little bit because they're like, hey, he's telling a story about us. He's telling us a story that we can relate to. Now, I'll just say this as an aside. Ladies, I really think that all of us in general, and women in particular, if we all understood the paradigm shifting nature of the way Jesus treated and talked about and talked to women, how he elevated women, which, by the way, is not something that followers of Jesus have always gotten right, shamefully so. But I think if ladies, if you really caught, like in its context, how radical Jesus was, I think every woman should be a fan of Jesus, even if they're not a follower of Jesus. Like, I don't know if I believe all that other stuff, but he's okay with me because Jesus, and because of Jesus, the early Jesus movement was the world's first egalitarian society. There's all kinds of history on this. And the Jesus movement was the very first original feminist movement. In fact, one of the earliest criticisms of the Jesus movement was all these women. It attracts all these women and these slaves and these poor people, and it doesn't seem to attract us educated, like higher class male type people. It creates this environment where all of these people are treated like okay and they belong. And the early Jesus movement said, yeah, we'll take that. We'll take that criticism. That part is actually true. So imagine a woman. We're to have 10 silver coins and then she loses one of them. What would she do? And all the ladies in the room know, and the guys are like, I don't know what ladies do when they lose something. And all the ladies know what they would do. It was like, yeah, same thing. Same thing. We're going to obsess over it. We're going to search until we find it. And then Jesus changes gears. And he tells one of his now most famous stories about a son who gets himself lost. And unlike the sheep and the coin or my phone when I lose my phone, which are not responsible for getting lost, the son actually is. Like, he got himself lost, like way, way lost. And he did it on purpose. He meant to get himself lost. And now it starts to get a little more personal. It starts to get a little more disruptive. It starts to mess with the categories because this is brilliant. Jesus is such a brilliant storyteller and communicator. He sets all this up with two stories that everybody will agree with. They're value neutral. Everybody's heads are nodding like, yep, that's exactly what we do. And then he brings it home with a story that both sides would have found upsetting. Story of a wealthy father who has two sons, and his relationship with his younger son is so bad. It is so distant and it's so difficult. They have lost each other to the point that the younger son is really just waiting around for his father to die so he can get his share of the inheritance. Like, that is all the father is to him now. But the dad won't die. He just won't kick the bucket. So finally, the younger son loses his patience and says, Father, just give me my share of the estate. Just give me what I got coming to you. Die whenever you want to. I'll be out of your hair. Just give me what I got coming. And everybody in the circle, like the unrighteous and the self-righteous, they all are taken a little bit aback by that. They're like, whoa, that's the tax collectors in the circle. Like, I might be bad, but I'm not that bad. At least I'm better than that guy. I mean, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. More shockingly, in an honor-shame society is what the father does next. Because in an honor-shame society, you might expect the father to beat the son, to expel the son, possibly even to kill the son. I don't know if you've ever heard the term honor killings, but honor killings are what happens in an honor-shame society when someone has behaved so badly that the only way to restore honor to your name or your family or your tribe is to kill the person who has been dishonorable, including yourself, if that's you, and to commit suicide. Like, that's just the honorable thing to do. What is this dad gonna do with a son like that? He gives in to him. He actually divides the property between him, and the younger son pulls a Steve Miller Band and just takes the money and runs. He's out of there. And he spends in a few months what the father has taken a lifetime to accumulate, and he's breaking every rule and every social, societal standard of any kind of decency whatsoever, and everybody knows about it, and eventually he ends up broke and friendless and alone. And then it gets worse. Then there's a famine. And we don't really struggle with famines because of the way our economy works. So think there's a depression. There's an economic depression where times are just really hard for everyone. And he ends up doing the only thing he can really actually find to do, he starts working for a pig farmer, which in a Jewish setting, this is about as low as you can get. No one in Jesus' audience is having bacon on their burger tonight. Like after synagogue, like that's unclean, that's filthy, and he's actually doing that. This is what we call rock bottom, and he's so hungry and so destitute that all he can think of is to eat the food, like the banana peels and the apple cores and such, that he's feeding these pigs. And everyone in Jesus' circle says, well, good. That serves him right. He is reaping what he sowed, and he sowed and he sowed, so just let him reap. And this is actually where the story is supposed to end. In fact, there are numerous stories from Jesus' day that go just like this, and this is where the story stops, because this is how moral tales in Jesus' world always worked. Somebody did a bad thing, really bad things happened to them. Don't be like that guy. That's the moral of the story. Don't do the bad thing. And everybody's like, well, good. Jesus pauses, looks around the circle. Everybody with me? And then he continues. One day the son begins to think to himself, what am I doing? What am I doing? Who have I become? What have I done with my life? He came to his senses. And some of you have had a moment like that. Some of you have asked a question like that. You've been at that very point. For me, it happened July 2nd, 1981 in a drug rehab. What have I done? What did I just do with my life? Some of you are at that point right now in your life. Or you're watching, that's where you're at, because that's why you're watching, or that's why you're here right now. You're coming to that point where you look in the mirror and you don't really recognize who's looking back at you. And you have this thought like, my 8-year-old self would hate me right now. They would despise who I have done, what I have done with our life. And I just want to say, if that's where you're at, you're in exactly the right place. You're in exactly the right place at the right time. I don't think it's any accident that you might be listening or that you might be here. And Jesus is about to tell us what God is like and who God likes. And nobody saw this part of the story coming. And so the son begins to think to himself, my father's servants are better off than this. Like, in other words, I am lower than the lowest person I ever met that I used to look down on. I am now lower than that person. And he comes up with a plan. He says, I know what I'll do. I am going to eat all kinds of crow. I am going to set out. I'm going to go back to my father. And I'm going to say, Father, I harmed you. I sinned against you. I did harm to heaven, and I did it against you. And I'm not even worthy. This isn't me trying to get back in the family. This isn't me trying to get my position back. That's off the table. I'm not even trying. I'm not worthy to belong to you like that anymore. But if I could just like sleep out in the barn and work out in the fields, you don't even have to see me. I won't even bother you. And if I could just have a meal every once in a while, that would be all that I'm asking for, if you could see your way to that. And so he begins rehearsing his speech. He gets up and he goes on his way to the Father, rehearsing his speech all the way. And the audience can't believe it. The gall of this kid at this point, like to show his face back there, because everybody knows what he's done. I mean, it's been all over Facebook and Instagram. National Enquirer have been running his face on the cover, telling the stories like that. The grocery store line is like wallpapered with his shenanigans and who he's done what with and how he has shamed his father's name and his town's name and his people's name. And he has the gall to like go back there and show his face. In an honor shame society, this move is as shameful as the first move. Like the people listening to Jesus' audience on both sides of the self-righteous, unrighteous divide are saying, who is this kid? And what does he think he can do? What does he think is going to happen to him when he shows his face back at home? And as disgusted as they may feel with the gall of the son, it just gets more uncomfortable after this, because see, they know what they would do, and they know how they think, and they think they know what the Father would do, but they did not know what the Father would do. Jesus had come to show them what God was like and who God likes. And so Jesus says, but while he was still a long way off, the Father saw him and was filled with, now, if you didn't know the story, what goes in that blank? What goes in that blank for you? If someone has treated you this way, brought this much dishonor to you, and you see them again, what are you filled with? Or what do you think goes in that blank when the Father sees you? When he sees you from a long ways off, and as much as we might want to have the right answer at this point, because some of us have heard this story before, in reality, what we put in that blank is shame or hurt. Yeah, I bet he feels that. I bet he feels hurt. I bet he's filled with anger. Or how about this one? Just disappointment. He's filled with disappointment at what his son has done with us. All very understandable, all very human. But Jesus has come to show us what God is like and who God likes. And Jesus says when he sees his son from a long ways off, he is filled with compassion. This just like visceral, gut level love and attachment and mercy and heartache over his son. And Jesus is telling this story a little bit slower now, letting each line, each moment sink in as he says it. And he's filled with compassion. And he ran to his son. Disgraceful. See, grown men in Jesus' world, dignified men, they don't run. Like to run, you have to hike your robe up and like, he ran to him. I mean, let him meet him halfway. And he threw his arms around him. And he began to kiss him. Like, well, that's just never going to happen. I mean, there's the whole suspension of disbelief, Jesus, and now you just went past that. Like, I can't even watch this anymore because now it's not even believable. It's just getting screwy now. There's no way that the dad is going to respond like that. And the son tries to get his speech out, right? He's like, well, I've sinned against heaven. I sinned against, the dad's not even listening. He's already turned back to the farmhouse saying, hey, quick, robe, my robe, best robe in the house. You bring that and a ring, bring a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. By the way, not the accoutrements of the farmhands happening here at all. This is full restoration to son. This is back in the family. To which, I mean, if we were honest when we read the story, here's what I think to myself. Maybe you don't think this way. Okay, is that really wise? I mean, is that even really healthy? I mean, you think about it. See, if someone was telling you this story about their own son, I know what I would say. And maybe you would be like, well, shouldn't we just wait a bit? Like, pump the brakes there, Dad. Like, hold on. Could you have some boundaries? Maybe a little. I mean, at least let him get the speech out, like a good apology. Why are you shutting that down? And shouldn't we I think, wait a couple of weeks? See if the change of heart sticks. Let him behave his way back, like prove himself back a little bit before. I mean, don't kick him out necessarily, but let him work for it a little bit. Let him, here's the phrase we use a lot. Let him rebuild the trust, right? We say that, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. You might love him, but don't you need him to rebuild the trust in the relationship before you go all in? And the father in the parable would apparently say, no. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but no. This isn't about behavior. This isn't about him behaving his way back into the relationship. This is about a relationship that was destroyed. I mean, it was completely gone. It was dead. And it's alive again. My son is back. For this son of mine, he says, this son of mine was dead. He wasn't dead. It was as good as if he had died, and he's alive again. He was lost, and now he's found. And the implication of Jesus' story, the implication when you think about it is that God, your heavenly Father, he doesn't look at people and see good people versus bad people, or right people versus wrong people. He just sees lost people and found people. Lost people and found people. People who are the object of his obsessive desire to find them, or the object of his rejoicing and delight because he has them back. Well, there's another character in the story we haven't talked much about, haven't heard much from, but you might remember him. He's the other brother. He's still there. There's the older brother, the well-behaved, hardworking, rule-following, very good at being good son. And he comes in from the field because, man, he's been all about the family business. He's been working hard trying to restore the lost luster that this kid brother of his completely destroyed. And he's trying to build the family business back. He's been working hard, and he comes back from the field, and he hears this party, and it's like hopping, like the kids would say lit. I mean, like the DJ is spinning the latest like electro, pop, house, funk, dance music, and the smell of food is in the air, kind of like it is out there right now. And he comes up and he's like, hey, there wasn't a party on the schedule. Sees a servant dancing by like, hey, what's going on? What's happening there? The servant says, oh, you won't believe it. Your brother is back, and your dad threw the party for him. And he refuses to go in. He is just so incredibly offended that would happen. And of course he is. Everyone in Jesus' circle is like, yeah, I can see that. I'd probably be offended too. You would probably be offended as well. Wouldn't we all be? And he refuses to go in. He's just so offended and he's so angry about that. And so the dad comes out to him. Now to meet him where he's at. Again, a very dishonorable, undignified move for a dignified man in Jesus' world, but of course he will. Of course, this dad would do something like that because that is the heart and the nature of this particular father. Because in truth, this is the story of two lost sons, and the father's obsession and willingness to do whatever it is, like dishonor himself however he needs to go as far as he needs to go for the relationship to be whole. And he's pleading, he's begging with his son, like, just come in. Just please, please, please come join the party. Come reconnect with your brother. Come celebrate. Come see how good it is that he's back. And now Jesus puts words in the mouth of all the righteous / self-righteous listeners in the circle. And the older son answers his father. He says, look, I have been slaving for you. I mean, I have been so good. I've never disrespected you. I've never brought shame to our family name. I have never disobeyed a single thing you've ever said. But this son of yours, not my brother, this son of yours who has squandered, who brought so much dishonor to your name, to our mom, you know how he broke her heart, to our reputation, and everybody knows exactly what he's been up to because it's just been in the news everywhere, and I just don't get it. I don't get how you can treat him like that and feel that way about him because he does not deserve it. He hasn't earned it. He hasn't behaved his way back into it. He hasn't proven himself. And that is so understandable, isn't it? Wouldn't you be saying the same thing? Wouldn't you be feeling the same way? And as much as this story is often told to illustrate the compassion that the father has towards that one rebellious son, notice now the tenderness of this father towards the older son. As Jesus says this, I think he's looking in the eyes of all of these offended, religious, self-righteous people. And he's saying this to them, my son, you're always with me. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad. And this is Jesus explaining his whole vision, like why he came to transform our understanding of what God is like and who God's like. And you can just see him pleading with the righteous, the good rule-following people in the circle, just pleading with them to see it the same way. We had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was not bad and is good again, not wrong and he's right again. He was lost. Now he's found. See, self-righteous, it doesn't really look good on anybody, especially on followers of Jesus. Whether it's your faith or your politics or conversations about social issues or just individual struggles that you're having with someone, when our rightness becomes an excuse to dismiss or push away or look down upon someone who we consider not as right as we are, who we consider less right, we are not as right as we think we are. And we are certainly not, in that moment, righteous. And if your version of religion empowers you to do that, if your version of Christianity empowers you to do that, you have the wrong version. You do not have the Jesus version, because to follow Jesus is to follow someone whose whole life and death were about flipping the script on what God is like and on who God's like and who God likes. And Jesus would sacrifice his very life to make it possible for both sides, the self-righteous and the unrighteous, to be restored into the relationship that his heavenly Father and ours desires to have with every single one of us, every one of his daughters and sons. And that's why Luke had to write this account. That's why he had to write it, and why people had to know this. And when we begin to view ourselves like that, when we get this story, like whichever side of the divide we happen to feel like we're on, and we can be on any side of that divide on any given day, right? Feeling a little more self-righteous, feeling very unrighteous and unworthy. When we begin to view ourselves, look at ourselves, and then view the person on the other side of that divide from us, the way the Father views us, as the obsession of his searching or the object of his rejoicing. There's just two kinds of people: the obsession of his searching, the object of his rejoicing, and sometimes, honestly, we're a little bit of both. When we begin to see that, we will no longer be able to bow up or look down or write off or dismiss or despise or distance ourselves from another human being that the Father has compassion on and loves dearly, and we will want only to include and to join our Father in the searching and the rejoicing. So, as we end, what if we did that? What if just for a week, I don't want to push you too far, I don't want to ask too much of you, but what if just for a week, as we're heading into Easter, right? What if we actually viewed people, including ourselves, that way, the way the Father views, as the objects of our Heavenly Father's obsession or the objects of his celebration? And then what if, as we head into Easter, what if we actually joined him in the searching and the rejoicing, inviting as many people into the Father's party as we possibly can? And we will pick it up right there next week as Jesus gets closer and closer to Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. With part 8 of our series, Investigating Jesus, How We Know, Why We Follow, let me close this in prayer. Heavenly Father, I just pray for myself and anyone who wants to throw their hat in this ring, that you would transform our view, beginning with how we see ourselves, but how we see the person on the other side of that divide from us at any given moment, to see ourselves and every other person in our lives as the obsession of your searching or the object of your rejoicing. And if you're here and you're at that point where it's like, I'm feeling a little like that son, I want you to know the Father's eager to have you back. And this moment right now, you don't have to wait any longer. This moment right now might be an opportunity for you to say, I come home. I give in. I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. I might not be worthy to be called your daughter or your son, but if you could just have me back. And you just need to know, as you're trying to get those words out, your Heavenly Father's already said yes. He's already throwing the party. Are you ready to say yes to him tonight? And you can do so just right now. I say yes to you, to following you. We pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, hey, thank you so much for being with us today. Really do hope you join us next weekend. But hey, if you got anything out of today, and maybe you did, or maybe you thought of somebody else who could use that, or you want to share that, you can always do that on our YouTube channel at Our Terra Nova, youtube.com/Our Terra Nova. And of course, invite them back next week as the series continues. Lyle was telling you how much we love to hear from every single person. And if it's your first time or second time or third time with us, thank you for spending part of your weekend with us. Please put your finishing touches on this card. Just let us know as much about yourself as you feel comfortable doing so. And you can throw these in the offering baskets on the way out. And of course, you can drop those serve flyers in the offering baskets on the way out. There's only 2 weeks left to join a team, so please get into one of these teams, maybe the Reset team or something like that, or our guest services or Super No Kids, anything like that. So put a couple of checks on there. You can drop that in the basket on the way out. And of course, you can drop your giving envelopes in the basket on the way out, and you can give online and on the app. Thank you for being a part of the most generous community in Orange County. And as you're heading out, don't forget we've got these invites. You got one of them sitting next to you. You can take that with you, but we got stacks of them on that table. You can take a few with you and pass this on. Be a part of that searching and rejoicing group with the Father, and then grab one of our signs while they're still there. They'll probably be gone this weekend, I'm sure. So grab one or two and take those with you, and then join us again next weekend for part 8 of the series. If you can hang out and have a burger with us, we would love to have you hanging out with us for one of our delicious burgers. You can even have bacon on it. God bless you guys. Have a fantastic week. We'll see you back next weekend.